Was he singing about a lost love, or was he singing about a lost life? When Elvis Presley recorded "Are You Lonesome Tonight" in 1960, was he just performing a song, or was he forecasting the next 17 years of his own story? The lyrics speak of an empty stage, a love that's turned strange, and a profound loneliness. For him, these were not just words in a song. They were his reality. Did he know that the empty chairs in the parlor would one day be his own, in a mansion full of people but devoid of connection? Did he feel the stage was already bare, even as millions screamed his name? Number 16, Are You Lonesome Tonight? Elvis Presley often slept all day and lived his life at night, a habit that started in the 1960s and became his norm. By the 1970s, he would sometimes not see the sun for days at a time. He rented out the entire Liberty Land amusement park in Memphis from 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. just so he could ride the roller coasters without being seen. His personal physician, Dr. George Nikopoulos, revealed that in the last few years of his life, Elvis rarely left his bedroom suite at Graceland. The opening line of the song is a direct question. Are you lonesome tonight? It's a question a person asks someone they know intimately, a former lover perhaps. But when Elvis sings it, the question feels like it's being asked to himself. He is the one who is lonesome, and his loneliness was a specific, peculiar kind. It was the loneliness of a man who could have anything he wanted except for the one thing he craved in normal life. Imagine being the most famous person in the world. You cannot go to a grocery store. You cannot walk down the street. You cannot sit in a public park. Every face that looks at you wants something. They want an autograph, a picture, a piece of you. They don't see the person, they see the icon. This was Elvis's reality from his early 20s until his death. His home, Graceland, became a fortress. It was his sanctuary, but it was also his prison. He was surrounded by his entourage, the Memphis Mafia, a group of loyal friends and employees who were with him 24/7. But their presence was a solution that also deepened the problem. They were there to protect him from the outside world. In doing so, they also cut him off from it. He had a group of people around him constantly. They would watch movies with him, talk with him, eat with him. Yet, a profound sense of isolation seeped into everything. The conversations were often shallow. The friends were also his employees. Their livelihoods depended on his goodwill. This created an imbalance. He could never be sure if their friendship was genuine or a performance for the man who signed their paychecks. He was the king, and a king is always set apart from his subjects. In his later years, this loneliness became a crushing weight. He would stay in his room for days, reading, watching television, and struggling with his health and the medications meant to help him. The question, "Are you lonesome tonight?" stops being a romantic query and becomes a raw, existential cry. It's the sound of a man in a gilded cage, looking out at a world he can see but cannot touch. The fame that gave him everything also took the most fundamental human experiences away. He was never just a man, he was Elvis, and Elvis was terribly, terribly alone. Number 15, Do You Miss Me Tonight? After their divorce was finalized on October 9th, 1973, Elvis and Priscilla Presley remained incredibly close. He would often call her late at night from Graceland or from a hotel room on the road. Sometimes he would sing new songs to her over the phone. On the night they legally separated, they held hands in the courtroom and cried. After it was over, he sang Dolly Parton's "I Will Always Love You" to her on the courthouse steps. The second line, "Do you miss me tonight?" follows the first with a more personal, direct ache. It implies a shared history, a specific person who is now absent. For Elvis, this line points directly to Priscilla. Their love story was a modern fairy tale with a complicated, sad ending. He met her in Germany when she was just 14 years old. He was a 24-year-old soldier, the biggest star in the world. He was instantly taken with her, and in her, he saw a chance to mold the perfect woman, someone untouched by the chaos of his life. He brought her to Graceland, and she became the center of his world, a living doll in his oversized house. But the reality was more complex. He was often on the road, Making movies in Hollywood, she was left alone in Memphis, a teenager expected to wait patiently for his return. Their marriage in 1967 and the birth of their daughter Lisa Marie in 1968 should have solidified their bond. Instead, the pressures of his life began to fracture it. His career was all-consuming. His prescription drug use was escalating. He was not always present, even when he was in the room. When Priscilla finally left him in early 1972, it was a blow from which he never fully recovered. She had grown up and needed a life of her own, one that wasn't lived entirely in his shadow. He understood her reasons, but understanding didn't ease the pain. The divorce wasn't born of hate, but of a sad necessity. They simply couldn't live together anymore. So when he sang "Do You Miss Me Tonight" on stage in the 1970s, the audience heard a man singing to a long-lost love. But he was likely singing to a very real person. He was singing to Priscilla. He missed the family he had built and lost. He missed the idea of what they were supposed to be. The calls in the middle of the night, the shared moments, even after they separated, all point to a connection that never truly broke. He missed her, and he needed to know if she missed him too. The question in the song was not a performance. It was a genuine plea from a man who had lost his anchor. Number 14, Are You Sorry We Drifted Apart? On August 14th, 1958, Elvis's mother, Gladys Love Presley, died of a heart attack at the age of 46. Elvis was 23 and serving in the U.S. Army. He was granted emergency leave to come home to Memphis. At her funeral, he was inconsolable, crying out, "Oh God, everything I have is gone." He would often talk to her at her grave, and for the rest of his life, he felt a part of him was missing. This line, "Are you sorry we drifted apart?" speaks of a slow, gradual separation. It's not a dramatic breakup, but a quiet, sad erosion of a relationship. While it could easily apply to his marriage with Priscilla, it resonates even more deeply with another, more fundamental relationship in his life, the one he had with his mother, Gladys. Gladys was the center of Elvis's universe. They were exceptionally close, sharing a private baby talk and an almost psychic connection. In the early days of his career, his driving motivation was to buy her a big house and give her a life of comfort. He bought Graceland for her. He bought her a pink Cadillac. But fame was a double-edged sword. As his world expanded, hers shrank. He was constantly on the road, surrounded by new people and new experiences. She was left at Graceland, a simple countrywoman, uncomfortable with the wealth and attention. She worried about him constantly, about the screaming girls, the demanding schedule, the dangers of a life she didn't understand. The drifting apart was not emotional. Their love never faded. It was a physical and experiential drift. He was living a life she couldn't share in, and she was at home, lonely and anxious. His induction into the Army in 1958 was the final, devastating separation. It took him away from her, sending him across the ocean to Germany. Her health, already poor, declined rapidly. She drank to cope with her anxiety and loneliness. When she died, just a few months after he left, he was shattered. The regret in the song feels like his own. Was he sorry they drifted apart? He was more than sorry, he was haunted by it. He felt a profound guilt, wondering if his fame had somehow contributed to her early death. He had built a world for her that she couldn't live in, and then he had to leave her alone in it. The question in the song becomes a conversation with a ghost. He is asking his mother, the first and most important woman in his life, if she was sorry too. He is expressing a lifetime of regret for a separation that was nobody's fault and everybody's tragedy. Number 13, Does Your Memory Stray to a Brighter Sunny Day? In July 1954, Elvis Presley, Scotty Moore, and Bill Black were at Sun Studio in Memphis, struggling through a recording session. During a break, Elvis started fooling around, singing an old blues song called That's All Right by Arthur Big Boy Crudup. He sang it fast with a sense of fun and freedom. The producer, Sam Phillips, heard it from the control room and knew immediately he had stumbled upon something new. That moment is often considered the birth of rock and roll. A brighter sunny day. For Elvis, that phrase perfectly captures the mid-1950s. It was a time of explosive creativity, raw energy, and pure, unadulterated joy. Before the massive fame, before the army, before the formulaic Hollywood movies, there was the music. It was just him, a guitar, and a dream. The days at Sun Records were magical. He wasn't yet a product. He was an artist, discovering his voice and changing the world in the process. Those early years were a whirlwind. He was a sensation. His controversial, electrifying performances on television, the screaming crowds, the gold records, it was all new and exciting. He was a young man from Tupelo, Mississippi, who had become the biggest star on the planet. He was a musical revolutionary, blending country, blues, and gospel into something nobody had ever heard before. That was his brighter day. He was in control of his art. He was dangerous. He was authentic. But the sun began to set. His induction into the Army in 1958 was a major turning point. When he returned 2 years later, the musical landscape had changed, and so had he. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, steered him away from the rebellious rock and roll and toward a more family-friendly image. The 1960s were largely spent making a string of mediocre movies with forgettable soundtracks. The fire was banked. The artist was replaced by the entertainer. By the 1970s, when he was performing in Las Vegas, a prisoner of his own legend, those early days must have seemed like a different lifetime. He was overweight, tired, and reliant on prescription drugs to get through the grueling schedule of 2 shows a night. He was singing his greatest hits to an audience that wanted to see the icon, not the man. When he sang, "Does your memory stray to a brighter sunny day," was he thinking of those first years? Was he remembering the boy in Sun Studio, full of hope and a new sound? It's a moment of deep nostalgia, a longing for a time when things were simpler, when the music was everything, and the future was a wide-open, sunny road. Number 12, When I Kissed You and Called You Sweetheart. As Elvis had a twin brother, Jesse Garon Presley, who was stillborn 35 minutes before Elvis was born on January 8th, 1935. Elvis grew up as an only child, but always felt the presence of his lost brother. He believed that a part of his soul was missing and often spoke to Jesse in private, especially during times of trouble or loneliness. This line is one of pure simple affection. When I kissed you and called you sweetheart. It evokes a time of innocence, a relationship in its beautiful, uncomplicated beginning. It's a memory of a love that was pure and hopeful. For Elvis, this can be seen through the lens of his relationship not just with a romantic partner, but with his own past, and with the very idea of love itself. His early relationships before the crushing weight of global fame were likely the most normal he ever experienced. He dated girls from his neighborhood, went to the movies, and lived the life of a typical teenager. But the innocence was fleeting. Once he became famous, every relationship was complicated. Every woman he met knew who he was. The power dynamic was always skewed. Was he loved for himself or for being Elvis Presley? It was a question that would haunt him. The line also connects to the deep, almost mythical love he had for his mother, Gladys. She called him by pet names, and their affection was open and constant. The memory of her love was a benchmark against which all other relationships were measured. It was a pure, unconditional love that he spent his life trying to find again. After her death, that source of pure affection was gone forever. But perhaps the most poignant connection is to his own lost innocence. The young Elvis was full of charm, politeness, and a genuine sweetness. He called everyone Sir and Mom. He was the boy who loved his mother and loved to sing. Fame changed him. It had to. It hardened him, isolated him, and surrounded him with people who enabled his worst instincts. The man in the sequin jumpsuit in Las Vegas was a universe away from the shy boy who first walked into Sun Records. The line, "When I kissed you and called you sweetheart," is a longing for that boy. It's a memory of a time when love was simple, when his heart was open, and when the world hadn't yet taken its toll. He is remembering a version of himself that was lost along the way. Number 11, Do the chairs in your parlor seem empty and bare? Graceland has 23 rooms, including 8 bedrooms and bathrooms. After Priscilla and Lisa Marie moved out in 1972, the upstairs, the family's private quarters, became Elvis's solitary domain. Despite the house often being full of members of the Memphis Mafia and their families downstairs, Elvis would spend most of his time isolated in his bedroom suite. This image of empty chairs in a parlor is a powerful metaphor for loneliness within a home. A house can be full of furniture, but without people and love, it's just an empty space. For Elvis, Graceland was the ultimate empty parlor. It was a sprawling mansion, a symbol of his success. It was the place he brought his mother, the place he brought his wife, the place his daughter was raised. It was meant to be the heart of his family. But by the mid-1970s, the family was gone. Gladys was gone. Priscilla and Lisa Marie were gone. What was left was a large silent house. Downstairs, the Memphis Mafia might be laughing and watching TV in the Jungle Room, but upstairs, where it mattered most, the chairs were empty. His daughter's room was empty. The space once shared with his wife was now his alone. The physical emptiness of the rooms mirrored the emotional emptiness he felt inside. He tried to fill the void. He bought things constantly: cars, jewelry, clothes. He filled the house with people. But it was a temporary fix. The people were his employees. They could provide company, but not the deep familial connection he craved. The house was a stage set for a life that was no longer being lived there. The parlor, the symbolic center of a home, was just a room with furniture. The song's lyric becomes a literal description of his life at Graceland. He was the king in his castle, but the castle was hollow. He would wander the halls at night, a lonely figure in a home that was famous around the world but offered him little comfort. The chairs were not just empty, they were a constant, silent testament to what he had lost. They represented the family life he had tried to build, the normalcy he could never quite grasp. The question is laced with a deep sadness, the recognition that a home is not defined by its walls, but by the people within them. And his were gone. Number 10, do you gaze at your doorstep and picture me there? During his 2 years in the U.S. Army, from 1958 to 1960, Elvis was stationed in Friedberg, Germany. He received over 10,000 letters from fans per week while he was there. He lived off base in a rented house and often felt profoundly homesick, missing his home, his mother who died while he was away, and his life in America. Waiting, hoping, staring at a door, wishing someone would walk through it. This is one of the most universal expressions of longing. For Elvis, this feeling of waiting was a recurring theme in his life, but often in reverse. The world was always waiting for him. But who was he waiting for? The line takes on a specific poignancy when you consider his time in the Army. He was pulled from the pinnacle of his career and sent thousands of miles away. He was grieving his mother in a foreign country, living a regimented life that was the opposite of his rock and roll freedom. He must have spent countless hours gazing out a window, picturing himself back on the doorstep of Graceland. He was waiting to go home, to return to his life, to reclaim what he had lost. Later in his life, the meaning shifts. After Priscilla left, did he gaze at the door of Graceland, hoping to see her car pull up the driveway? Did he picture her coming back, making the empty house a home again? The late-night phone calls suggest he did. He held on to the hope of reconciliation, or at least a return to the companionship they once shared. He pictured her there because he desperately wanted her to be there. There is another layer to this. It's about waiting for a connection that might never come. In his isolated world, he was waiting for someone to walk through the door and see him, not the legend. He wanted someone who wasn't an employee or a fan, someone who could break through the wall of fame that surrounded him. He was waiting for a genuine, uncomplicated human connection. He would sit in his room, the world outside clamoring for him, and perhaps he just stared at the door, hoping for a visitor who would never arrive. The doorstep wasn't just a physical place. It was the barrier between his lonely reality and the life he wished he had. Number 9, is your heart filled with pain? Elvis suffered from a wide range of chronic health issues throughout his adult life, many of which were kept hidden from the public. He had glaucoma, high blood pressure, an enlarged colon, and liver damage. He was in near constant physical pain from these ailments and from the demands of his physically taxing stage performances. This is the most direct and vulnerable question in the song. Is your heart filled with pain? The answer for Elvis, both emotionally and physically, was a resounding yes. The emotional pain was evident. The loss of his twin brother at birth cast a shadow over his entire life. The death of his mother left a wound that never healed. The failure of his marriage was a source of deep and lasting sorrow. The isolation of his fame was a constant ache. His heart was filled with the pain of loss, regret, and a loneliness that no amount of adoration could cure. But the pain was also brutally physical. From the mid-1960s onwards, his health began to deteriorate. The relentless schedule of movie making and later, the Las Vegas shows took a tremendous toll on his body. He performed with incredible energy, but it came at a price. He suffered from chronic pain, insomnia, and a host of other ailments. To manage this, he turned to a dangerous cocktail of prescription medications. He was prescribed drugs for everything: painkillers to get through the shows, sleeping pills to come down from the adrenaline high, stimulants to wake him up again. This cycle of dependency created a new kind of prison. The drugs that were meant to ease his pain only created more problems, damaging his body and clouding his mind. Dr. Nicopoulos's records showed that in the last 8 months of Elvis's life alone, he had been prescribed over 10,000 doses of various pills. So when he sang, "Is your heart filled with pain?" he was describing his literal physical reality. His heart, enlarged and damaged, was struggling. His body was failing him. Every night on stage, he was fighting through a wall of physical agony to give the audience the show they expected. The rhinestones on his jumpsuit sparkled, but underneath, the man was in pain. The question in the song is not just a lover's lament, it's the confession of a man whose body and spirit were breaking. Number 8, Shall I Come Back Again? 1968, after years of making lackluster movies, Elvis's career was seen as being in a major slump. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, arranged for a television special that was supposed to be a simple Christmas show. Elvis, however, saw it as his one chance to reclaim his legacy. Against the Colonel's wishes, he and director Steve Binder created a raw, powerful, black leather-clad performance that reminded the world he was the king of rock and roll. The 68 comeback special was a monumental success. Shall I Come Back Again? This is a question of reconciliation, of a second chance. In the context of a relationship, it's a plea to mend what's broken. For Elvis, this question was the central theme of his entire career from 1968 onwards. He was asking his audience, the world, and perhaps even himself, do you still want me? Can I be who I was? The 1960s movie era had sanitized his image. The dangerous rebel of the 50s was gone, replaced by a smiling, harmless movie star singing songs to kittens and clam diggers. His musical relevance had faded. He knew it, and he hated it. The 68 comeback special was his answer to that question. He came back, he returned to his roots, singing with a passion and intensity that had been missing for years. It was a defiant roar, a statement that the real Elvis was still there. The comeback was a triumph. It led to his legendary Las Vegas residency and a return to live touring. He was back on top, but the question never really went away. In the 1970s, as his health declined and his performances became more erratic, he must have asked himself this question every night before he walked on stage. Can I still do this? Am I still the king? Shall I come back again tomorrow night and the night after that? It's a question filled with vulnerability. It acknowledges that he had been away, that he had lost something. It's the plea of an artist who fears he has lost his connection with his audience. For Elvis, who defined himself by the love of his fans, the thought of them not wanting him back was his greatest fear. The song's question was his own. He spent the last decade of his life continually coming back, trying to recapture the magic, even as the lights were starting to fade. Number 7, Tell Me Dear, Are You Lonesome Tonight? One of the most famous bootleg recordings of Elvis is the lawing version of Are You Lonesome Tonight, recorded live in Las Vegas on August 26th, 1969. During the spoken word bridge, a woman in the audience took out her wig and began polishing her bald head with it. The sight caused a backup singer to start laughing, and Elvis completely lost his composure, breaking into uncontrollable giggles. He could barely get through the rest of the song. The repetition of the main question, "Tell me, dear, are you lonesome tonight?" serves as the song's emotional anchor. It brings everything back to that core feeling of isolation, but the way Elvis performed it over the years tells its own story. The original 1960 recording is tender, sincere, and heartbreaking, but the famous long version reveals something else entirely. On the surface, it's just a man getting the giggles on stage. It's a human moment, a crack in the polished veneer of the superstar. But it's more than that. By 1969, he had been singing this song for 9 years. He was in the middle of his triumphant return to the stage in Las Vegas, a grueling schedule that demanded an almost superhuman level of energy and emotional control. He was a professional. For him to break character so completely shows the immense pressure he was under. The laughter isn't just joyful, it's hysterical. It's the sound of a man on the edge. He's singing this incredibly sad song about loneliness and the absurdity of the situation, the woman with the wig, the ridiculousness of the performance, the whole Las Vegas spectacle just becomes too much. The laughter is a release valve. For a few minutes, he wasn't the king of rock and roll singing a sad ballad. He was just a guy who saw something funny and couldn't stop laughing. This moment makes the song even sadder. It shows how much of his life was a performance. He was supposed to stand there and emote sadness on cue night after night. The laughter was a rebellion against the script. It was a brief, chaotic moment of authenticity in a life that was increasingly staged and controlled. When he finally gets himself under control and sings the final line, the question feels different. It's as if he's acknowledging the absurdity of it all. He's surrounded by thousands of adoring fans, and he's singing about being lonesome. The irony was not lost on him. Number 6. Why was his whole life a performance? The spoken word bridge of the song begins, "I wonder if you're lonesome tonight. You know someone said that the world is a stage, and each must play a part." This line from Shakespeare's As You Like It was not just a piece of poetry for Elvis. It was the blueprint of his existence. From the moment he became famous, his life was no longer his own. It was a performance, and he was the star. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, was the director. The Colonel was a master promoter, but had little regard for Elvis as an artist. He saw Elvis as a product to be sold. He booked the movies, he managed the merchandising, he controlled the public image. And Elvis was the lead actor in a long-running show called Elvis Presley. He played the part of the polite Southern boy, the rebellious rocker, the handsome movie star, the Las Vegas demigod. But the man behind the roles, Elvis Aaron Presley, was often lost. The stage wasn't just in Las Vegas, and his home was a stage. When guests came to Graceland, he was expected to entertain them, to be Elvis. Even his friendships were part of the performance. The Memphis Mafia were his friends, but they were also his bodyguards, his assistants, his audience. They lived in his world and played the supporting roles he assigned them. This life of constant performance took a huge toll. He had no privacy, no off switch. He was always on display, always expected to be charismatic, generous, and larger than life. It created a deep disconnect from reality. He didn't handle his own money. He didn't know the price of bread. The world was brought to him, curated and managed by others. He was playing a part, but he hadn't written the script, and he couldn't leave the stage. The 68 comeback special was a rare moment when he tried to rewrite the script to direct his own show. But soon the Colonel reasserted control, and he was back to playing his part in the glittering prison of Las Vegas. The line in the song is not a metaphor, it is a literal description of his life. Number 5 was fate just a role he was forced to play. The next line in the recitation is, "Fate had me playing in love with you as my sweetheart." The idea of fate, of destiny, is a romantic one. But for Elvis, it had a darker side. He often felt that his life was not his own to control. He was a passenger in the vehicle of his own fame. Did he choose to become the king of rock and roll, or was it a role that was thrust upon him by a combination of talent, timing, and the ambitions of men like Sam Phillips and Colonel Tom Parker? He often seemed bewildered by his own success. He was a truck driver who became a global icon overnight. It was a destiny he never asked for and was not prepared for. The idea of fate Having him play a part is key. It suggests a lack of agency. He was cast in a role. The script said he had to be the rebellious teen idol. And then the script said he had to be the clean-cut soldier, then the all-American movie star, then the Las Vegas showman. He played these parts because it was his destiny, his job. He was trapped by the world's expectations of him. The sense of helplessness extended to his personal life. He felt it was his fate to meet and marry Priscilla. He brought her into his world, trying to make her fit into the role of Mr. Elvis Presley, but he was already playing his own part, and there was little room for her to be herself. The breakdown of their marriage could be seen as a failure to stick to the script that fate had written. In the end, his fate was a tragic one. It was his fate to be isolated by fame, to suffer from poor health, to become dependent on prescription drugs, and to die young. He seemed to have a premonition of this. He told friends he didn't expect to live a long life. It was as if he knew the final act of the play was already written. The line in the song, which sounds like a romantic surrender to destiny, becomes a sad admission from a man who felt he had no control over the direction of his own life. Number 4, did he love her at first glance? The spoken bridge continues, laying out the narrative of the relationship. Act 1 was when we met. I loved you at first glance. This line is pure storybook romance. It speaks of an immediate, undeniable connection. This perfectly mirrors the beginning of his relationship with Priscilla Beaulieu. They met on September 13th, 1959, at a party at his house in Bad Nauheim, Germany. He was 24, a GI and the most famous entertainer in the world. She was 14, the stepdaughter of an Air Force captain. He was immediately captivated by her. She was young, beautiful, and seemed shy and unimpressed by his fame. To Elvis, who was surrounded by sycophants and screaming fans, her quiet demeanor was intoxicating. He saw in her a blank slate. She was someone he could shape into his ideal woman, away from the corrupting influence of Hollywood. He played the piano for her that first night, singing Are You Lonesome Tonight? The connection was instant. He told his friend that she was the woman he was going to marry. It was, in his eyes, love at first glance. This Act 1 was a period of intense, idealized courtship. He pursued her, and she became the focus of his life in Germany. He was still grieving his mother, and Priscilla filled a profound void. He could be vulnerable with her in a way he couldn't be with anyone else. This period was the fairy tale beginning. It was the brighter, sunny day of their relationship. The lyric captures the memory of that perfect start. Before the complications, before the loneliness and the pressures of his life intruded, there was that one moment. A glance across a room. A song at a piano. A feeling that this was the person he was meant to be with. For Elvis, a man whose life was so complicated, the memory of that simple, perfect beginning must have been both a comfort and a source of deep pain. It was a reminder of a promise that, in the end, could not be kept. Number 3, why did she seem to change? The narrative of the song takes a dark turn. You read your lines so cleverly and never missed a cue. Then came Act 2. You seemed to change. You acted strange. This is the moment the fairy tale curdles. The perfect partner suddenly becomes a stranger. From Elvis's perspective, this is exactly what happened with Priscilla. For years, she played the part he had created for her. She dressed as he liked, did her hair and makeup as he instructed, and waited for him at Graceland while he was away. She read her lines perfectly. She was the beautiful, adoring wife of the king. But a person cannot be a doll forever. Act 2 was Priscilla's awakening. She began to realize she had no identity of her own. Her entire life revolved around him. When he was home, the house was full of energy. When he was gone, it was silent and empty. She was a young woman who had never had a chance to discover who she was. She started taking dance lessons and karate classes. She made friends of her own. She began to build a life outside the walls of Graceland and outside the shadow of his fame. To Elvis, this was a betrayal. You seemed to change. You acted strange. From his isolated point of view, she was changing the rules of the game. She was no longer content to just play her part. She was improvising, writing her own lines. He couldn't understand it. He had given her everything, so why would she want more? He couldn't see that what she wanted wasn't more things, but more of a life. Her change was her growing up. Her strangeness was her becoming her own person. The line in the song is filled with the confusion and hurt of a man who feels abandoned but doesn't understand why. He saw her independence as a rejection of him. He couldn't grasp that it was a necessary step for her own survival. This moment in the song is the sound of his heart breaking, not because he stopped loving her, but because he could no longer understand her. The woman he loved at first glance was gone, replaced by a stranger he didn't know how to talk to anymore. Number two, was it better to hear the lies? The most devastating part of the spoken bridge is this. And why I'll never know. Honey, you lied when you said you loved me. And I had no cause to doubt you. But I'd rather go on hearing your lies than to go on living without you. This is the rawest, most desperate moment in the song. It is a confession of absolute emotional dependency. Did Priscilla lie when she said she loved him? No. She did love him. But their lives were built on an impossible foundation. Her love had to coexist with his fame, his entourage, his drug use, his infidelity. The love was real, but the life was a lie. The lie was that they could be a normal, happy family under these extraordinary circumstances. When Elvis sings this line, the pain is palpable. It's the agony of feeling that the entire relationship was a performance on her part. And I had no cause to doubt you speaks to his shock and disbelief when the marriage finally crumbled. He had built his world around her, and now that world was collapsing. But the final part is the most telling. I'd rather go on hearing your lies than to go on living without you. This is not about love anymore. It's about a terror of being alone. His loneliness was so profound, so all-consuming, that he would rather live in a false relationship than face the emptiness of being by himself. He would accept a lie as long as it meant she was there. It is the ultimate admission of his emotional fragility. This line reveals the truth of his gilded cage. He was surrounded by people, but terrified of true solitude. Priscilla's presence, even if he felt it was no longer genuine, was a shield against the crushing loneliness he felt. Her departure removed that shield. He was left exposed and alone, and it was a state he could not bear. This is not the voice of the confident king. It is the voice of a scared, lonely man who would do anything to not be left alone in the dark. Number one was the stage bare at the end. The recitation concludes with the final, heartbreaking image. Now the stage is bare, and I'm standing there with emptiness all around. And if you won't come back to me, then they can bring the curtain down. The play is over, the audience has gone home, the actor is alone on an empty stage. This was the final act of Elvis Presley's life. On the evening of August 16th, 1977, Elvis was at Graceland, preparing to fly out for another tour. The stage was waiting for him in Portland, Maine, but he would never get there. The curtain came down for the last time in the bathroom of his private suite. He was 42 years old. The emptiness all around was his reality. The house was full of plans for the future of tour, more shows, more songs. But his body and spirit were empty. He was exhausted from years of grueling performances, chronic illness, and a crippling dependency on prescription drugs. The stage of his life, once so crowded and bright, had become a lonely place. The important people, his mother, his wife, were gone. He was left with the emptiness. The final plea, "If you won't come back to me," is directed at Priscilla, at his lost youth, at the sense of purpose that had faded. It's a plea for redemption that he knows will not be answered. And so he surrenders. Then they can bring the curtain down. It is a line of profound weariness and resignation. He was tired of the performance. He was tired of playing the part of Elvis Presley. He was ready for the show to be over. When he recorded the song in 1960, he was a young man with his whole life ahead of him. He could not have known that he was singing his own epilogue. He was narrating the tragedy that was to come. The song is not just about a lost love. It is about a lost life. It is the story of a man who stood on the world's biggest stage, surrounded by adoration, with emptiness all around him, waiting for the curtain to fall.